This is Driven Arts right here.
Oh, dear me. Impressive.
Yeah,
So,
it's just me here. Um, so I don't know if you're aware of this, but we are 100% fully remote, distributed around the globe. A couple of us used to share an office, but we actually split up because we figured it's actually better for productivity, especially the programmers. They like to be left alone. So now we all work from home. There's two of us based in New York,
yep.
and we're actually the only Americans. I know we got one more in Florida. We got a couple in Europe, all over, a bunch in the UK, and then two guys in Australia. I think that covers it. And
Okay.
it's probably five or six people who are really full time right now, and then a smattering of contractors that kind of come and go as they're needed.
Okay.
I mean, really, the way it worked is it started out as a kind of a hobby project of George, our lead programmer, and as he progressed it along, he'd show the project to people and try to get them interested. And kind of one by one, it started to pick up momentum as we got more people on board. And after the Kickstarter, once we got cash infusion and had more to show, it picked up a lot more steam. And it kind of continues to this day. When we are trying to hire someone now, like hiring is the hardest thing we do, and it's a lot easier to hire the more further you are along in a project because you have more real stuff to show. What you have looks a lot better.
Yeah.
Um, so that's kind of been the evolution of the project over the last 3 years now. Heavily inspired is the term we use.
Yeah, but that's correct.
Yeah, I mean, played a lot of Dave Defeat. There's not really much else to say about it. You've probably seen the petitions online and just the size of the active user base and Dave Defeat and other games. It says something about the staying power of those games. Also that they were simpler. Like we being a small team, we couldn't go compete with a Call of Duty and do all the things that they do. I mean, we're gonna try and get close to like as close as we can to a AAA experience, but we just don't have the resources to do the depth of the content. Whereas these older games, they were designed in simpler times, and that kind of matches to what we wanted to do. Game dev is super easy, regardless of what anyone tells you. It's real fun. No, like I mean, actually, the development of the game, I'd say, is the easy part for us. Just sitting down and being able to, sit at a computer for 10, 12 hours a day and bang stuff out is not hard in a way. It takes a lot of time and it's a lot of work. But the hardest part, the hardest part was the Kickstarter. The harder parts are actually, engaging with the community and devoting time to that and, doing the marketing and stuff. And launching a product, for instance, is incredibly difficult. It's a lot of work from a lot of different, skills and work streams. Um, so everything has been super enjoyable except for putting it out into the world. When you put your kind of heart and soul into something and then you have to put it out there in the public for people to critique, that is tough. So
Yes.
that I hadn't really experienced anything like that before. But at the same time, the things that are hard are what make the game better. That's kind of why it's been our philosophy kind of from day one to get stuff into people's hands earlier, probably when it's not even ready. And I think we've taken a little bit of flack for that, but it's allowed us to, when we get feedback earlier, the end product is better as a result of that. Oh, absolutely. I mean, not hitting a deadline is it's not uncommon in this industry, but it's not something you ever want to do. There were a couple of factors that led us to that decision. One was, when we had our Kickstarter goal was to get us to early access. We ended up getting a bit more money, and we were able to raise more money from investors because of that. We had proven that concept. We now have more to work with. So, for instance, we are just about getting through the portion of the Kickstarter funds in our budget right now, and now we're moving on to the match that we said we'd put up. So we didn't need to release. We heard plenty of stories from other developers saying, like, if you have the money to keep making it better, you should do that instead of putting it out there. So there was that. We also, as we developed over the summer, we brought on a bunch of like really talented new artists, and we kind of changed the bar for what our goal was in terms of quality. I think we learned that we could make something a lot more polished than we had originally set out to do. The only downside of that just being it would take a little longer. So, I mean, at any given point, there's thousands of different factors that we're weighing to make a decision like that. It's not just like we didn't just get to August and say, oh, we're not ready at that point. There are a bunch of things, and it really comes down to what's best for the game, and what's best for us as a studio, because we do want to be at this for several years. So we're not thinking short term, even though people are bashing our door down, telling us to release to early access right now. So I'll just say flat out, there are a couple of things here that I don't have authorization to just give out. I'd have to check with the team first, but I can say our last pre-order, we were selling it at $24.99 US. So it will be probably more than that, and it's definitely not going to be over 40.
Uh,
We'd like our game to feel worth that much money, but well, this is our first game. It's still early on. We want it to be fair because that's part of the experience when people play it. It's do they feel it was a good value. So one thing we said very early on was no map DLCs, because having been in that boat when you don't buy the maps and then you're in a server and you get kicked off because you don't have the right files. And I think the major studios have learned that lesson too by now, because it bifurcates your player base, and that's never good. So we plan never to charge for maps. The only thing we'd ever charge for would be something like a cosmetic unlock system, or things that didn't impact the game at all. But honestly, right now, like in our near term window, we have plans for stuff like that, but we want the game to be what we want it to be on just that one off fee. And we have plans to add more stuff for the full release, but then even more content beyond that as well. On that one time fee. Yeah,
so,
I'll just add to that. One of the things we're proud of was we think we're able to do a lot with little resources, and part of the reason we have fully embraced this distributed model is it saved us a ton of money on overhead, and that just means like we don't need as much revenue to keep going and to keep making more content. So we kind of consider that as a competitive advantage of ours versus some other indie or major studios. So we are PC first, um, but not PC only. We're not gonna stop developing on PC until we're totally happy with it. We are targeting PS4 and Xbox, and we haven't done anything actively, just besides getting all the agreements set up. We haven't started development. We toyed around with it a couple months ago on one of the platforms, but then just decided it would have been a distraction at that point. And really, like until we have a certain level of content, like until we have the release level of content, there's no point in creating a whole new code base. So I can't really give a time scale now because it's heavily dependent on what happens after we hit the store, and like what kind of resources we can devote to those platforms.
makes sense.
But we are lucky that Unreal, and it's not easy, but it's a lot easier than it would have been in the past, to get those builds up and running. We are on UE4, and we are pushing, I'd say, the limits of what's graphically capable with it. So that that typically puts Mac out right away, just because the hardware that those computers get, just aren't up to snuff. It's another one of those things we're open to exploring. Like same thing with Linux client. It's not at the it's not at the like the forefront of our our feature list right now, but it's something we have the option to. So when we do finally have some free time, it's something we could test very easily. But it's we and the reason I say that is we're not keeping it in mind now because our only goal early on is to make the experience as good as we can on the PC. And if you try to fold Mac into that, we'd have to make some concessions, and we just don't have to worry about that yet. Good question. So I'll give it in two answers. The only computers that I've seen fail, like completely fail to run the game, have been some computers with video cards under 2 gigabytes, so basically 1 gigabyte of video RAM. I'm not sure what numbers that maps to, and then computers with under 4 gigabytes of total RAM. So, like for instance, we have a lower end machine that we test on. It has like a 4 generation old i7 and a GTX 560, which has two gigabytes of VRAM. And based on the new build, we just ran this test actually like 30 minutes ago. We were getting 30 FPS on Epic in Karantan, our new level, and I think 60 on medium. So I'd consider that a lower end piece of hardware, and that's kind of our low watermark. We want that machine to be able to run it at 60 frames. Where a 3 or 4 year old computer should be able to run our game at 60 frames.
Okay, that's cool.
And the nice part is I've actually been pleasantly surprised with how the engine scales down. On low, Unreal still looks pretty impressive in a lot of ways. So it's not the end of the world if you are running on low or medium settings.
Okay.
Yeah, we I guess we haven't really talked about that much in a while. We There's a company called Easy Anti-Cheat. I don't know if you're familiar with them. I
Yeah,
think
yeah, I know them.
the Netherlands. So we're gonna integrate them before launch. We're probably gonna do some stuff on our own as well. I mean, at the end of the day, it's like a cat and mouse game, and you need to devote this, whatever resources you need to fix the problem and stay ahead of the cheaters. But at the end of the day, the best solution really is server admin controls and the ability to ban people from your server. That's the only 100% effective mechanism. But we want to make sure from day one that this is something we get ahead of because we'd rather get ahead of it than have it become a problem and then be playing catch up like we've seen some other people have to do.
Yes.
We got a lot of faith in those guys at EAC though. They talk a big game. So not something I put a ton of thought into. I mean, we're not like a single player game, so there's not a ton of content to localize. I can say the first two languages we'll be adding are German and French. So that's a complex question because I know you guys or a lot of people built out custom abilities on their own servers. Our goal is to be better than games that came out 10 years ago. We think we can offer more control. Uh, but like for instance, we've already built out a GUI for a server control panel. It's still kind of in V1, but things that you would have had to do through commands and command line, we want you to be able to do that just in a simple point and click interface. So we're still building that out. We're actually hoping to test it relatively soon with some of the clan partners who back us. I mean, it's going to be whatever you guys want it to be because having a culture around community hosted servers is so important to us. We need to enable you guys. We don't want to be hosting all the servers. So we want to give you the control to do what you want to do, and just make it an easy experience so you don't need people logging into actual servers. It's got to be all done from right within the game. Yeah, I mean, so we already have some basic stuff, just like the ability to change the number of classes on the fly. So you could, I mean, something like just flicking on all pistols match, something like that. I mean, calling something a plugin means by definition not part of the vanilla version of it. Um, so our hope is to really build that functionality in where possible. But I mean, I'm not the expert here, but I'm sure we could also make it a little easier for people to design their own plugins and kind of have them be interchangeable, and you could load in what you wanted. But we're a big fan of like simplicity, especially when it comes to things we code. So I think our goal would be to get all the fun. Like this is a place where we can add a lot of extra functionality that you might not necessarily need to use, but just having it all there is probably more valuable than having a lot of custom solutions, I think.
Okay.
So we're going to take the best ideas we get, in all areas, and then come up with a solution we think fits best. We talk about our map editor. We actually mean the UE4 version of the editor. So it's similar to if you open up the Epic launcher. There's a tab that says modding, and it has the editors for Ark Survival and for Squad. So that is essentially it's a custom version of our game in editor version that obfuscates all the source code. So it has all the content, but it's not the full game. You couldn't go and make your own versions of it. So that is the first thing that we are going to be spending time on, because we consider that to be the most valuable. Like it obviously takes a little bit more work to use UE4, but the power you have with it really lets you create some amazing things, and that's the editor that we want to get into our mappers' hands as soon as possible, because that gives them everything they need. You were talking about what we refer to as our in-game editor, or our custom editor, and that's probably why it's been confusing. That that we have not touched since our Kickstarter when we made the prototype of it. It's still something we're interested in, just because the idea of being able to make stuff together is very interesting to us. But that has a whole, another set of challenges. So that's probably not something we even toy with until after early access. But it's still on our wish list. So I mean, it's got to be visual. I know you guys have your own custom setup on your server, which I've seen. I think it's probably gonna look a lot like that. I also saw. I don't know if you played Day of Infamy from New World Interactive. I think they had something similar when I tried it out. I think that the main thing is it's just got to show. It's got to show game mode. It's got to show what a sense of what the map looks like, and then I think also if there are any if there's anything with the lighting, or whether it's whether it's a thunderstorm or it's like a night map, you'd like to know that when selecting a map. Even if you don't know the layout of something. So I think once again we're going to keep it simple, but we talk about things like custom maps as well. There will be assets like if you submit a map that you'll also have to fill out, being like a thumbnail image for things like that voting system,
Hmm.
and loading screens and things like that. So that's another area, that's part of our editor where we need to make it easy for people to make content that's going to slot well into the game,
Yeah, sure.
and not have all these mystery custom maps. Probably not out of the gate, but like I said, we're gonna give you what you guys want. So we want your server to feel personal, if that's the way you want to handle your server. We want people to let players know that they're on their server. I think that's our mantra there. Talked about. I mean, I've heard a lot of different versions in the past 6 months on what made games like Day of Defeat great. There are people have their own opinions in that. I will say, the big thing that I think we need to nail is just it's two things. I've heard a lot of people talk about skill ceiling being a problem with a lot of newer games. Games that are just you can pop right in and get several kills in your first round. I think we need to make sure that the skill ceiling is high, which Dave Defeat definitely had. But the other part of that is also making it accessible. So, like, if you were to look at, for instance, one of the MOBAs, like League of Legends or Dota or probably some new ones I don't know about, those games take 300 hours to be barely competent in. We, we don't want something that's so complex that you need to spend that much time just to be serviceable. And I think that's what was always amazing to me about Dave Defeat was it was so friendly to the pub pub match casual player. You could hop in for 15 minutes, hop out, but it also worked really well on the competitive side because the skill ceiling was so high. So those are two things that I'd say we're definitely trying to emulate. And it's a little tough because you do have to walk a balance. We've had plenty of players hop into our game already and totally balk at just the amount of recoil. But there's certain things we're gonna hold fast to that we're not gonna compromise on. But we do want people we do want to get new crowds interested in this game that might not have played any game from before 4 years ago. Yep. So we have the flag capture game mode. We're playing on a couple other game modes, some which will be similar to I think in Day of Defeat you had maps where both sides are trying to blow up other objectives on the other side. You had maps where one side was attacking, the other was defending. We do have objective based place the satchel charge stuff in the works right now, and that actually I think might turn into a couple different variations. So I can't really say with full precision what the final results are going to be. So I guess the answer is yes, but there are also some other things we want to explore. We've had a lot of requests for search and destroy, which I think our new map Carentan will play very well with. So we know what our bread and butter is, and we're going to keep doing that. But we also would like to explore some other areas. Like attack and defend is something that really excites me. A lot of the realism units, I think, have over the 10 years had a lot of time to create a bunch of creative game modes.
Yeah,
So
sure.
I think that's a great resource to pull from. And it is a place that we want to eventually offer a lot of depth in, being alternate game modes, but while still having the primary ones. If that makes sense. It's also a place we are looking to player input, and ideally would even be the kind of thing where we can give you the tools to create your own crazy stuff and submit it to the workshop. So our stretch goals that we hit were for the British first, and or the Commonwealth Army, and then the Russians or the Red Army. Um, Both of those are still planned. They're on schedule. I'm probably going to do them in that order because that's the order in which we laid them out. And we don't consider them just skins. They're new factions that bring a lot to the game. So each of them will have their own set of unique weapons, um, which I'm excited about. And we're going to launch each one with their own map. So we're not going for pure realism, but we want all of our we are looking at history and real life for inspiration for our maps, and we want all our maps to feel plausible because that's a big part of it's just part of game immersion, which is important to us. We don't want Russians storming the beach at Omaha, but not to say we're not going to provide you the ability to select on your server which teams play on which maps, but we would like to launch each faction with at least one map that is unique to them. And then, once that faction's launched, that's kind of opened up that door for us to make more maps with that faction. Okay, so I'm glad you used the term esport because that is the proper term, and I think a lot of people confuse competitive play with esport. Uh, my position, I'm not going to speak for the rest of the team, but my position is we don't get to decide if we're an esport or not. That's up to the players, that's up to the community. Um, but what we can do is make sure our game is better suited to a competitive environment. So that is something from day one we've wanted to do, largely because a lot of what makes a game fun is it fun to play competitively. I mean, I'll say already when we've had some community hosted just 6 versus 6 scrimmages in our game, that those like play tests were the most fun that I've had playing so far. I kind of forgot what that was like. So that's something that's always going to be at the back of our mind. Um, but make people. I get this question a lot too. Is people ask, what are we doing to make the game more competitive?
Yep.
And uh, like design wise, I think I already talked about um, the skill ceiling, making it making a high skill ceiling that's still like accessible. I think the boring stuff is just making a stable, well optimized game that's free of bugs, that's polished. You can't you can't have a competitive game where you're getting booted from the server like happens to me in Overwatch all the time, and then you can't rejoin. That kind of stuff gets so frustrating and then leads to people quitting. So I'd say in the near term, that's where we're going to be focusing a lot of our efforts, especially before before we launch on early access. And then I think the last like tenet of what we're doing to make our game more friendly to competitive play is all the stuff we're doing with the map editor. Because if you look at David Feeder, a lot of games, the most popular competitive maps did come from the community. Excuse me. So we want to give our community the tools to make the maps that are best suited for competitive play. So all this stuff is stuff we've thought about. I mean that they are considerable development efforts. So once again, we're going to take care of the stability, the game balance, all that stuff first. But I'd say you mentioned two things. You said matchmaking and ranking system. So matchmaking, in my opinion, is something that if you do, you have to do it really well. No one likes a half-assed matchmaking system. So it's not something we're going to be focusing on definitely by early access launch. Might come some. It's one of those things you don't want to put the cart before the horse.
Yeah.
We really want to make sure the foundation is solid before we start to undertake something like that because there's a lot of ways to do that wrong. That is on our wish list. It fits in with our development style of keeping everything in the game. I mean, there are integrations with Steam that make that a little easier, but that is something we would like to have. It's something we've kind of struggled with now. We just you have people on forums, you have people on Discord, you have people on Reddit. Like there's people all over. It is nice when you know what the like de facto place to go is. Also, we do want plans to have the ability to manage things in game. But like I said, these are massive development systems. So when we only have one or two programmers, that's not something we can do in tandem with game development. Ranking is probably like more near term on our wish list
Yeah.
because people have asked for it. But it also, it's something we want to figure out early on. I'd say our goal is to have the ranking and progression system like fully polished and ready to go day one of full release. Because when we hit that full release milestone, we want there to be lots of reason to come back and keep playing the game and progress. But we will be testing that kind of stuff out during the course of early access. I can't tell you what it is because
Oh, come on.
that would ruin all the work we've put in to keep this a secret. But I can tell you that it'll be announced when we put up our Steam store page and we announce the actual release date for early access. Expect something. Yeah, thank you, and I'm sure the rest of our player base thanks you as well. This has been a good opportunity for us to just give you guys some more information.